Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I myself am doing pretty alright. Actually, a bit more than alright. I had a very good time. I got some time with family. I had a very nice dinner with my mother today, who I love very, very dearly. So that's put me in a pretty good mood, even though I am quite sleepy. I hope your week, everybody, I hope your week finished up pretty good. Mine was definitely full of work, for sure, but it was not bad. And I'm making some headway on some stuff with work, which is nice. I thought, if you guys did anything cool over this week, feel free to put it down below. I would love to hear it. And if you're doing anything over the weekend that's pretty cool, feel free to let me know as well. I think this weekend's going to be pretty low-key for me. I actually have a very, very good friend of mine who I've not seen in the flesh in a very long time coming down next week. So a lot of my weekend, is going to be filled with cleaning and preparation, all that good stuff, which is all done in a very, very happy spirit because I have not seen him in a very long time, and he is a very, very, very close friend to me. So I look forward to seeing him. Well, whatever you're doing, I'm glad you're here with me, and I hope it's a good time. If it's been a good week or a rough week, I hope this will be a good little chill out for you. So I'm going to be chilling out here with you. I got a nice, pretty hot. It's not exactly steaming, but it's good enough for going to work. Cup of coffee here beside me, and a glass of water over to the side of me as well. And it's been a little bit since we played some Witch on the Holy Night. And if you guys remember, all the excitement's over. Sort of. But, Soujuro is not exactly completely out of hot water. And he is currently being grilled by Miss Alice Kuonji herself. So let's see what's going on. She is really pretty, isn't she? Not my usual type, but I dig Alice. She's cool. That is mostly why I like Alice. She's really, really cool. The person she was talking to was none other than the one inside the bottle, which I failed to mention as well. Soujuro has been magicked inside of a bottle a la Genie in a Bottle, or Genie in a Lamp style, and now Alice is the only one that can speak to him, and he can speak back, so Alco is not able to interfere in this one. She was, of course, referring to Soujuro's early comment. It was her way of testing the boy who implied that living in this mansion seemed safe. Then again, considering Alco had invited this witness to a house of mirrors for a fight to the death, she was in no position to criticize. She would make sure Alice did not let her emotions get the best of her, but for now she was content to observe as a bystander. After a moment, Alice's expression changed. She must have gotten an answer to her question. Without any way to tell what the situation was inside the bottle, Alco had no idea what the answer was, however. Only that Alice's face was the one she had made when the boy she was talking to said what she wanted to hear. For an instant, she glanced at Alco. Slightly shaking her head, she reached for the small bottle. She said his name with what seemed like a forlorn frown. As soon as she removed the stopper, the air in the room quivered. The boy, who had been casting a shadow on the wall until a moment ago, now leaned against it for support again. Alco turned around to face Soujuro right behind her, resting her elbow over the back of the sofa. That is the face of a woman who knows exactly what she did. Soujuro answered with unusual hostility. Alco was reminded of his strange behavior, and she was sure that he would be scared or shocked, not angry.
夢で似たようなものを見てなかったら今頃心臓が止まってたところだ。そこはついてたと思う。信じられないのはなんでいちいち実践するかってことだ。魔術は怖いものなんだって言えば済むだろうに。それと物騒な青崎の声聞こえてたぞ。
物騒で悪うございました。
She's not apologetic at all.
言葉じゃなくてきちんと実感してもらいたかったのは本当よ。どう？魔術ってもんを甘く見てたでしょ、宗十郎。
As much as he hated to admit it, she was right. Though, it was not that he had taken magecraft lightly, but merely that he couldn't understand it.
実感うんぬん言われても困る。これまでの青崎の無茶っぷりと今のわけのわからなさはとても比べられない。
そりゃそうよ。アリスと比べないでよね。アリスの魔術は私たちの中でもデタラメで、もう言葉にできないぐらい最悪なんだって言ったでしょ。失礼ね。
失礼ね。
人間を脅かすという点なら青子の方がよっぽどひどいと思うけど、それよりあなた本当に彼を殺す気はあったの？一体どんな追い詰め方をすれば青崎なら多分安全なの？そんなのはあんたに決まってるでしょ。こいつが何て言ったか知らないけど絶対意味違うから。こいつはね、そもそも何が危ないのかやけどするまで
It
気づ
seems
か
it's
ない。
turned from the Inquisition of Soujuro to the interrogation of Alco.
っていうか、やけどしても
How
よ
the
し
turntables.
知らなきゃ安いなんて本気で思っちゃう天然ボケなの。ね、そうでしょ、宗十郎。
Well, he had no idea why she was suddenly shouting, but he nodded anyway, just to be safe. The drawing room had become awfully noisy. Alice sat watching the two at a complete loss. If only she knew how loud it would be. And so, Soujuro accepted his supervised life in the mansion, and that he would be living under the same roof as two professional mages. Having experienced firsthand how dangerous that life could get, he was finally at peace with the situation.
まあそういうことなら。
Even if he did not seem to like it, he had thought it through in his own way and come to a clear resolution.
それじゃあやっと本題に入れるわね。監視するとは言ったけど、どうやって宗十郎を監視するのか、そもそもあなたを監視する原因になった魔術とは何なのか。
Rules of the house time. Perhaps he was brought up to listen closely to lectures about new information, because Soujuro suddenly looked attentive. Alice, on the other hand, kept her mouth shut in silent defiance.
最初に言っておくと、あんたをここに住まわせる期限は決まってるから。要はその期限まで誰にも私たちのことを喋らず、また勝手に死ななければ晴れて自由の身ってこと。
He's on probation.
ね、そうよね、アリス。そうね。私たちを怒らせなければ、そういう可能性もあるわね。
よし、いきなり話が食い違った。
Yep, this already sucks. Alright, guys. I love it. Soujuro's head dropped like he knew what was coming.
ちょっと黙ってて、アリス。あとあんたも黙ってろ。
She scowled at the two of them, already at her wits' end.
話を続けるけど、秘密保持のためにあんたを住まわせる場合、二次災害はどうしても避けられない。同じ家にいる以上、余計に秘密を見せることになるからね。
Now that Alco mentioned it, Soujuro could see her point. With their target of observation under house arrest, the disclosure of more confidential information was inevitable.
ちょっと待ってくれ。堂々巡りじゃないか、それ。
大丈夫、問題ないわ。だって最後にはここで暮らした記憶ごと私
忘れてもらう。
そう、 公園での一件から丸ごと全部忘れてもらう。ルーンっていう魔術系統があるんだけどね。その中でサクッと記憶を忘れさせるものがあるのよ。非人道的であるのは変わらないけど、ま、命を消す代わりに記憶を消すってことで妥協して。
青崎、それは。
悪いけど反論は却下。
Fool, you have no human rights here. You've established this already.
で、肝心の忘却のルーンなんだけど、私もアリスも専門外だから文献を探して習得するのに時間がかかる。つまりそれが監視の期限ってわけ。私たちが忘却のルーンを見つけるまで命を担保に口を閉じていてもらうわ。アリスはそんなややこしいことはせずに五感全部壊してしまおうなんて言ってるけど、しずきくん、リビングスタチューとか嫌でしょ？
Gotta think about this one. Soujuro only understood about 80% of what Alco had explained, and the last part about a living statue had gone straight over his head. He had tried his best to visualize what Alco was going on about, but the only thing he could conjure in his mind was an image of the mascot creature, Kitsy.
それは確かに嫌だな。
Alco agreed with the bewildered Soujuro, neither one the wiser to the other's misinterpretation.
とにかく遅くても1ヶ月で忘却のルーンは見つけ出せるだろうし、1回きりの実行ならプラス2ヶ月ぐらいでなんとかなるわ。
That's not too bad. 3-month probation period. Some questionable amnesia forced upon poor Sonergy.
それまであんたには
Worst fates have been explored in Fate, that's for sure. In the Nasuverse in general.
そっちもこっちの事情を知らないのは気持ち悪いだろうし。なんで今から簡潔に現代の魔法使いの何たるかを教えてあげる。それで少しは私たちへの勘違いもなくなるだろうし。
Also, surprisingly smart on Alco's part. Go ahead and nip any misunderstandings in the bud as best she can. Not that she thought this country bumpkin had any idea of old or new anyway. The thought brought a smug grin to her lips.
洋館のことは後にして、まずは私たちの立場についてね。あ、でも1から100まで理解する必要はないから。どうせ門外漢なんだし、感じ入ったことだけしっかり噛み締めておきなさい。
Soujuro nodded obediently to Alco's professorial instructions. This was Alco's way of telling him not to ask questions when he did not understand something. And though Soujuro had taken issue with her statement, he meekly obeyed, knowing better than to object now. Alco nodded approvingly at his attentiveness and started her lecture. Her long lecture.
まず魔術師、魔法使いの話からね。魔術と魔法の違いは宗十郎には関わりのない話だからしないけど、それぞれ別種のものだと思ってくれればいいわ。
We've touched on it before in some of the early streams of this, but magic is essentially the juiced up version of magecraft. It is truly strange and one of a kind, and there are very, very, very few people who can do it. In the modern day of the Nasuverse, I believe there's 5 magics, I believe, that are known, and there are of course mages who are trying to find other ways to produce magic, principally through finding a way to the root, essentially the root of reality. Principally, a lot of them will try and find that through the Holy Grail the Holy Grail War. There we go. And if you want to know more about that, go check out the Fate series.
で、魔術師のことだけど、これは絶対条件として同業者に知られるのは仕方ないとしても、あなたみたいに関わりのない人間に知られるのは罪に当たる。なぜかっていうと、魔術ってのは隠されていないと力が薄れてしまうものだから。
And this here is one of the reasons, one of the principal reasons why magic is kind of dwindling. Because the way magic works, this is an oversimplification, I'm sure she'll go into it a little bit more, is that a lot of magecraft works based off the principle of it being not understood, it being a mystical thing, a mystical action or concept, and the more something is understood, the less mystical it is. Hence, it becomes weaker.
神秘の語源は閉ざすというギリシャ語だけど、魔術は限られた水着でなければ魔術でなくなってしまう。文明にとって未知なるもの、未開なるものは開かれていないからこそ恐怖に値するのと同じね。知られたら迫害されるから隠すじゃないの。未知で亡くなった魔術師というより魔術ね。明かされた魔術は力を弱めてしまう。だから隠匿するのよ。
This is also why,
私たちの未来のため。
if you look into some of the other Fate and Natsuverse series, some things are rather frowned upon in mage circles, specifically for this reason.
じゃあ青崎も弱くなってるのか？俺が見ちゃったから。
いいえ、別に。ここからはちょっと込み入った話でね。弱くなるっていうのはあくまで全体。それも随分と未来の話。汝隠匿すべしって不分律はこの大元の仕組みが形骸化していつの間にか絶対のルールになっているだけなの。文明社会の法律と一緒よ。
Not sure I can
犯
sell
罪、
myself.
不
I feel
道
like that
徳
was
を
a
罰する
passage
の
from
は
one of the
人
keys
間
of
的であ
Solomon.
ろうとする意識の高さと
If you're a nerd
それとは
about
全く
such
別の
things,
全体の仕組みを守るための構造的な
that may
結
be
論でしょ。
something you would be interested in reading. It is how would I describe it? Apocryphal at best text, hailing from the Judaic tradition.
犯罪が罰せられるのは野放しにしたらせっかく築いた社会がうまく機能しなくなるからで、私たちにとって犯罪に当たるのは神秘の一般化、低俗化であって、不道徳とか殺人とかはまあそれぞれの良心次第ってことで基本的に罪にもならない。そんなろくでもない連中にルールを敷いたのが魔術協会っていう集まり、組合みたいなものよ。
Now, I didn't think about it before, but this analogy for the Mages Association is very apt, actually. They are kind of like a labor union.
魔術を普及の神秘
A
と
really
せよ
mean labor
という
union.
のは魔術を魔術として永続させるために敷いたルールに過ぎないわ。
But they aren't the only association. I believe we touched on it before as well, but there's also institutions such as the Atlas Institute. And Chaldea, I suppose, if you're familiar with Fate Go, is kind of its own thing, essentially, as well. And I think there are a couple other
その原則は絶対
smaller
にさ
groups and associations here and there. And some more, I suppose you'd call it, well, there are some mages as well that are loosely affiliated, I suppose you would say, with the Mages Association or the Clock Tower, but largely do their own thing as well.
これを破った者は魔術世界にもいられなくなる。いや、実際問題として生きていくのが困難になる。私たちは私たちのまあ魔術師としての命、そういうのを守るために目撃者であるあんたを消さなくちゃいけなかった。そこ同情とかしなくていいから。私たちの事情を知ったぐらいで遊園地のことを帳消しにしないでよ。
He's deep in thought.
私
He
た
wants
ち
to
は
know.
私たちの判断であんたを殺そうとしたんだから、誰彼のせいってわけじゃない。恨むならきちんと私を恨んでちょうだい。ま、それはともかく過去魔術師は職業として成り立ったぐらい社会に認知されていたけど、その魔術自体は墓まで持っていく秘密だった。それがどう歪んだかは知らないけど、現代ではその職業すら秘密にしなくてはならなくなった。
Homegirl. You can fry people basically at will. What do you mean? You don't understand why the profession's got to be kept secret.
そこまでしないと
Of course it did.
遠い未来、魔術すら消費するだけのものに解体されると教会は恐れたのよ。自然界の仕組みも
That's an
かつて
interesting,
天上の領域だった宇宙の
interesting
運
thought
営すら
experiment though for the
私たち
Natsuverses.
が人知で解き
How
明かせ
long
る
would
こ
it
とになっ
be
た。
until magecraft just doesn't exist or is so much of a minor force that it would essentially be worthless? Or could it be that way? Is there still enough mysticality out there that in the setting it will perpetually be around?
魔術が最後の砦になると教会の設立者は信じたのかもしれない。それとも魔術なんてもう意味がないって達観したのかもね。そんなわけで魔術師はその正体を隠して各々の秘技を伝えていった。他人に教えるわけにはいかないから必然的にその伝承者は子孫になる。私もアリスもそうやって何代か続いた
This is
連
part of the
中の
reason
末なの。
why mages are both very intensely focused on family and bloodlines, and also really cutthroat within
さっ
those
き言った魔術
bloodlines.
協会っていうのはそんな細々と続いてる連中を束ねる一大組織。協会もいろんな派閥に分かれるんだけど大抵の魔術師はロンドンの魔術協会に属している。汝隠匿すべしっていうのも協会の三大原則の一つよ。魔術師が一般人に秘密を漏らすと教会から罰が下される仕組
Something
み
I
に
would like to add to this, I don't believe she touches on it, but there's also the church and their church executors, and they have their own branded secret abilities and whatnot, such as the Black Keys. And they're really
そ
cool.
んな罰なんかなくても自分と血族が伝えた魔術のために目撃者は消せないといけないんだけど。
They also don't particularly like each other, mages and the church, specifically the executors and the mages that deal with them and vice versa. It's also really funny because it's really funny when there's a crazy magic system and then someone just pulls out a gun. That's one of my favorite things. It's so funny to me. And that was the end of the first part of the lecture. I'll go pause for a moment. Soujuro was doing his best to process the information.
次行くけどいい？
Oh, she can be nice. She did ask.
いいけどその前に確認したい。魔術師が正体を隠すのは自分の決まりを破ると教会というところからお咎めが来る。つまり青崎たちもその教会に入っているのか。
いいえ、私たちはフリーよ。一応教会とつながりはあるけどね。単純に教会は最大勢力ってだけ。連中は頼まれもしないのに。
That is also a very
魔術世界
interesting
全
point
体の
as
秩
well.
序を守ってる。
They no one really asked the association to kind of be this ruling body. They just kind of taken it upon themselves and will foist their principles onto others as well.
だから私たちが何であれ彼らとの関わりがないにしても魔術師としての決まりを破ったら罰しに来るわ。
わかった。大体飲み込めた。
よしよし。そうやって自分に必要な部分だけ手に入れなさい。じゃ、次は魔術について。と言っても、私自身語れるほど学んでいないんだけどね。ごめん、こっちの話だから忘れて。さっきも言ったけど、現代において魔術は無意味なものになりつつある。ライターのない大昔なら、火を起こせれば、それは魔術として成り立つわ。けど今は何かと便利でしょ。
See, this is one thing I do really like about the writing of Mahotsukai no Yoru. You take this character, Soujuro, and he is, through his unique position, able to provide a lot of wonder and interest and tension to the story because of that, but it also ties into the plot narrative through the fact that he's able to relate to things that are on a more meta, not quite meta as in like fourth wall break, but meta as in the meta structure of the setting through that. Soujuro nodded with a glum look on his face. He had been made painfully aware of such conveniences. Difficult tasks that would occupy an entire day of work in the mountains could be performed easily here. For him, having been brought up in the mountains without electricity or running water, city life was by definition magic. He only wished it would not be such back-breaking work to adapt to such conveniences.
でも 道具を使わずに火を起こせるのは神様の仕事だと思うけど。
そのために積み重ねた手間は火炎放射器を手に入れるように面倒だとしても。
In typical Alco fashion, we've gone from a lighter to a flamethrower. Soujuro wasn't sure how to answer Alco. It would have been easy for him to ask Alco how much accumulated effort she thought it had taken humans to imitate those gods, but he knew it would come across as an insult.
さっきのを見る限り魔術ってのは何でもできると思ったけど、それは誤解なのか。
He glanced at the glass bottle on the table. Mentally, he sighed in relief. He still had not come to terms with the fact that he had been trapped inside that tiny thing. However,
あら、それこそ誤解よ。万能じゃなければ誰が魔術なんて学ぶと思ってるの？
Alco puffed out her chest as she chided him.
手間暇かかるけど魔術にできないことはないわ。中にはできていないけどできているように見せるみたいな何らかのイカサマはあるけどね。この世界に生まれた以上、その許容範囲でできないことなんてないの。そこで魔法が出てくるんだけど、それはまた改めて。
That's kind of the breakdown, right? That I touched on a little bit earlier, is that Magecraft can do a lot of crazy stuff, but it's got to follow some set of rules, right? Whereas true magic can essentially break rules of reality, right? Just flat out break rules of reality. And even, in some cases, space and time as well, which is pretty cool. There's, I can't remember his name right now, but there is a guy who possesses true magic who essentially peers into and meddles with other realities, which is kind of wild.
私が言いたかったのは、魔術は奇跡を起こしているのではなくて、その過程が奇跡だってこと。結果が奇跡になるのは魔法の方なの。偉大な魔術師っていうのは個人の魔術だけで旅客機飛ばしたりする人のこと。対して偉大な魔法使いっていうのは今不可能なことを可能にする人のことよ。そういった意味じゃ私たちは最後の魔法使いになるかもしれないけどね。脱線してるわよ、青子。
Alice is getting tired of this ramble. She said, "Continue, please." Alice had been quietly listening until she muttered her rebuke, as if Alco had crossed a line.
そこまで教える必要はないでしょう。しずき君に教えるべきことは私たちと暮らす上で危険になることだけじゃなかった。悪かったわ。ジョイ口滑らせた。ともかく魔術師っていうのは暇さえあれば魔術の実験をしてる連中で、自分の家系が伝えてきた秘技を守るためなら鬼でも悪魔にでもなる。必然そのアジト工房って言うんだけど、工房も魔術的な
There's
機
one
構
thing
が
I
積み
do
重
if I
なっ
like the
て
idea
要
of
塞みたいになっちゃう。
I'm a sucker for the Wizard's Tower and the Lich's Dungeon and all that sort of thing. And taking those concepts and making them in a modern setting is very fascinating to me. Especially without the kind of like Harry Potter, like you just go through a back alley a certain way, tap on the bricks a certain way, and you open up into a whole other area without any seeming kind of separation from it and normal reality. Like having it's the idea of you've got to deal with actual concrete reality, even if you do have stuff like bounded fields to keep people out or make it harder to see or to perceive, but you still got to deal with the actual physical space. And that gets my mind churning from like like how do you hide it, especially if you have a big workshop and you do a lot of research in it, right? Or just over time you need more. Do you have multiple locations? Do you have one big one? How do you transport your supplies? How does the logistics work? How do you defend that?
この洋館もそういった工房と同じなの。不用心に歩き回ってさっきみたいなことになったら私でも助けてあげられないから、暗闇には気をつけなさい。気がついたら鏡の中にいるとか本気であるから。
Good old mirror. Soujuro so hoped they would provide him with a general idea of what to watch out for, but he passed, knowing that he was unlikely to get a straight answer.
枝葉から入っちゃったけど、要は私たちのプライベートに関わるなってこと。いくら最後には記憶を消すって言っても、それを見られた段階で消すしかないものもあるから。
なるほど。この中にもルールがあることはよく分かった。他に注意すべきことは。
His eyes wandered as he trailed off mid-sentence, pondering. He understood that the mansion was more dangerous than outside, and that Magecraft needed to stay secret, but the explanation seemed to contradict his current problem. For starters, how had he managed to witness something that they took such pains to keep hidden?
すまない。話の腰を折るんだけど、いいかな。魔術師は教会という組織で結ばれてるんだろ。なら、どうして青崎はあんな人形に襲われたんだ。あれの持ち主が魔術師なら。
Very good, Soujuro. You get a gold star. An actual interesting question.
それは最後にしようと思ってたのよ。普通はここまでの話だけで眉唾者っていうか笑い飛ばすっていうか、いくら経験済みだからって魔術なんてもんをあっさり受け入れるなんてできないっていうか。
Aoko scratched her head as though troubled by how Soujuro could take every word at face value. Across from her, Alice's face betrayed no expression, but she shared the same opinion.
おかしいのか、それ。
おかしいわよ。そもそもあんたは第一ステップから変だった。普通は驚いたり怖がったり無視したりするものなのに。
He's a little bit odd, isn't he? That's why we love Sonoshi. We love some Soujuro around here. In retrospect, this question should have been posed at the House of Mirrors. Back then, though Soujuro was surprised by seeing the phenomenon of magecraft for the first time, he showed no surprise or discomfort toward Aoko, the mage wielding it. Feeling the probing stares of the two girls, no, the two mages, made Soujuro feel uneasy. From where he was standing, their suspicion was suspicious in and of itself.
何でも何もない。青崎、山だよね。あるものはあるのが当たり前なんだよ。
You know, that is kind of a good point. I don't know how familiar you guys are with just being out in the woods, in the wilderness, in the mountains. But there are some things that you come across, and just by the nature of it, especially if you're out there for a while, it doesn't have to be like, oh yeah, I lived out there for months. But you know, you spend several days, a week, maybe two, hiking, hunting, whatever you do, fishing. And there are things, there's just reality, and you just have to accept it as it is. You know? So that is a good point.
理由をつけられるだけの知識がなかったからにしても、実際に見たものを信じないなんてことはないんだ。それに君も言ったろ。あなたにとっては魔法もライターも同じものなんだろうって。
Though they weren't really the same to him anymore, he added quietly before shutting up. What he said about those innocent days in the mountain had come from the heart, and the words resonated with not only Aoko Elzaki, but Alice Koonji. It was something everyone should have, principles to stand by. Indeed, to this boy, those words were an unshakable truth.
あるものはある。
She was impressed, if only slightly. If this boy, no matter how much of an outlier he was, could accept the things around him, he would be able to get through this just fine.
そうね。宗十郎はそうなのよね。簡単に信じてもらえることが信じられない。なんて。私たちの方がどうかしてたわ。
Aoko, not only compliment, but apology? Crazy. Much like when Aoko met Soujuro for the first time. In that classroom on his first day, Soujuro took everything that was happening in his stride. The memory brought a bitter smile to Aoko's face.
気を取り直してっと。宗十郎の疑問だけどね、魔術師もいろいろあって教会に属していない連中もいるの。
Alco, for all her bluster about being very brusque and to the point, she a yapper for real, dog.
こういった連
She
中
just
は
be
教会の目
talking
を
about
盗んでやり
stuff.
たい放題で利益目的で他の魔術師に喧嘩を売ってくる。あの人形の持ち主もその類。そんな連中にとって私たちは都合のいい格好のカモなのよ。私たちは教会と協定関係にあるだけで門下ってわけじゃないから。私たちが殺されたところで教会は助けてくれないしね。
でも
It's interesting.
魔術師が魔術を使うのは禁じてるんだろ。
The association is a fickle beast, even if you're a member.
それが公にならないのなら
I would refer you to the case files of Lord El Malloy II. Those, I believe, they're novels as well as there is anime adaptation of them.
むしろ
I'll believe all of
バレ
them
な
have
け
been
れば魔
adapted,
術師同士の争いを
but
奨励
they're
して
quite
るぐらい。
interesting. I recommend it.
技術も使わないと錆びるってね。ま、私たちが襲われてるのはそれとは別の話で、単に土地を持ってるからなんだけど。
土地ってこの家？
まさかこの三崎市一帯の管理地の権利を持ってるのよ、私とアリスは。
They're loaded.
管理地ってつまり土地の利権？
Dazzled, Soujuro looked away. He was sure he could see a halo of light around Alco. He had only been renting an apartment for 2 weeks, but he was already aware of how magnificent the prospect of owning land in the city must be.
おお。
The word Soujuro was trying to articulate was rich. He shook all over with an emotion he did not fully grasp.
悪いけどそういうんじゃないから。私たちで土地って言ったら魔術師としての霊地の所有権、支配権のことを言うの。うちはマイナーだけど古くからこの辺りに根を下ろしてた魔術師で、三崎町もうちの管理下ってわけ。管理地っていうのはね、霊的な力が歪んで集まりやすい土地のこと。そういう土地は昔から貴重で、魔術の実践、実験には不可欠でもある。成功への絶対条件は優れた霊地、堅固な工房、多くの弟子たちってね。魔術師たちにとって土地付き館付きの住み家を持つのは一つの野望なんだから。
Soujuro let her continue while wondering exactly who these two girls were to have achieved both ambitions already.
でもその管理地は大部分が教会に仕切られてて、もう余っている土地はないの。はぐれ魔術師や土地のない魔術師は教会に毎月寄付金を納めて土地を借りるしかない。ま、手よく教会のお偉いさんたちに尽くす。でもここの土地は何百年も前から青崎のものだから教会とは関係がないの。ここまで言えばわかるでしょ。そういったフリーの連中からすれば私たちの管理地はこの上ないごちそうなんだって。
Soujuro nodded to himself, unsure whether to call the conversation mundane or outright disturbing.
よくわかった。青崎たちは土地の奪い合いをしているんだ。
Very astute, Soujuro. Very good.
そういうこと。ただ三崎の管理地はマイナーのさらにマイナーだから、やってくる挑戦者も三流ばっかりよ。今回の敵だってどっかの三流魔術師がここなら楽に奪えると思ってやってきたんだろうし、ま、それもあんたの乱入で休戦してるんだけど。
Problem with another mage muscling out on your turf? Go go gadget
管理地
synergy.
の話はそれで十分よ、青子。しずきくんも他に魔術師がいると分かってくれたようだし、危険があるとすれば私たちの戦いに彼が巻き込まれる可能性だけど。それは大丈夫でしょ。だってこいつ魔力のかけらもないじゃない。魔力感知には引っかからないし、 番犬以下の人間は戦力って言わないから狙われることもないだろうし。
He's been demoted from dog status.
私たちはただ
Poor man.
忘却のルーンを見つけるまでこいつを逃がさなければいいだけでしょ。
Alice silently stared her partner down. Their ideas of involving Soujuro differed greatly in both gravity and risk. Aoko's lack of experience had led her to believe that Soujuro would not get directly involved in any fighting. It was an honest and rational thought. Aoko despised wasted action, so it was natural for her to expect the same frugality from her enemies. However, there were those in this world who could not tell right from wrong until it was too late.
先のことは誰にもわからないからその時になって後悔がなければいいけれど。
With a gloomy sigh, Alice came to her feet.
ちょっと何のために長話したと思ってるのよ。一番重要なあんたの意見聞いてないんですけど。あなたがあなたの方針を守るというのならそれでいいわ。私も好きにするだけよ。
Ooh. Alice glided soundlessly towards the door. As the girl in black opened it, she paused, barely lit by the dim corridor. Then, without warning, to the rhythm of her footsteps, the small glass bottle floated into the air and shattered without mercy. That's why we can't have nice things, man.
あの時こうしておけばよかった。
Her sharp tone made Soujuro's face go pale. Man, look. We need to have a little bit of Southern hospitality. Like, imagine this, but it's the Deep South. There'd be a lot of veiled threats, but it would all be done over a bunch of great home cooking food. I'm talking mac and cheese. I'm talking mashed potatoes. I'm talking collard greens and beans. Better. At least I think so. At the very least, it'd be very delicious. And everything is a little bit better over a bit of delicious food.
私も言い忘れていたけど。
She icily eyed them before turning away, and in a voice even colder than her gaze, stated,
まだ認めていないから。
Her frigid departure seemed to forebode the many difficulties that lay ahead.
たく、往生際が悪い。
Aoko leaned back on the sofa while hurling abusive epithets. Her face looked even more irritated than
見
usual.
逃すのとここに住まわせるのは別問題よって。じゃあそれ以外にどんな方法があるっての？譲る気もなさそうだし、この分じゃ実力行使に出るかもね。
Well, she about did. You guys remember when Soujuro woke up from his magic-induced coma? Alice got very, very close to shanking him before Aoko got back. Soujuro threw a wary glance at Aoko while she grumbled. He wondered what Alice's show of defiance meant, shattering the glass bottle like she did.
宗十郎には記憶をなくしてもらうってことで話はつけたけど、心の底から納得してないってことでしょ。アリスにしちゃ珍しく他人を意識してたけど、やっぱりここに住まわせるとなると難しいみたい。寝てる分には良かったけど、起きてるあんたを見たらこうえも言わぬ刺激心を刺激されたとかさ。気をつけてね、宗十郎。
Watch your back
あ
indeed.
の子、あんたを殺しに来るかもしれないから。
If anything, Aoko's warning was an indication that persuading Alice had hit a dead end.
なんか状況はあの夜からあまり変わってないようだね、青崎。
She shot him an unconcerned look in reply.
そうじゃないぞ。青崎の次はあの子がやる気満々じゃないか。さっきみたいな目にあったら逃げることもできない。こういうの生殺しって言うんじゃないか。
そうならないように努力するのね。ま、 アリスの理由は遊園地の時ほど切迫したものじゃないから、そのうち諦めてくれるとは思うんだけど。
青崎の時とは違うアリスの理由？
ええ、遊園地の時は秘密厳守のためだったけど、それは一応解決してる。あ、なんで秘密厳守云々であそこまで反対する理由はないの。あの子は単にね、ここに住んでほしくないだけなのよ。
Now,
それ
I
だけ
can
で
be a bit
アリスはあんたを殺したが
of a cave goblin myself. I can very much be a homebody to the extreme. I'm a very reserved, borderline reclusive person myself. I've been called a hermit by some people that I know I'm very close to. I'm not murderous when somebody is around me, though. That Alice is next to level. Leave me alone. She said so matter-of-factly, her eyes cold and serious. Soujuro had hoped for a trace of deceit or exaggeration, but alas.
確かにあの子はそんな素振りだったけど、変だね。それならもっと他の手段を取ればいいのに。
Perhaps feeling guilty about putting Alice out, Soujuro looked uncharacteristically concerned. Aoko immediately knew what his words really meant.
例えば記憶を消す魔術が見つかるまでさっきの小瓶の中に閉じ込めておくとか。
The apathy in her voice until now was gone. Soujuro answered with a simple nod. In truth, it was undoubtedly the easiest solution for all parties concerned. However,
宗十郎、私約束は破らないの。覚えておいて。
she hated taking the easy way out, and that quiet fury was clear in her soft words. As for where that fury was directed, Soujuro was acutely aware. The pain in his chest made him regret making her say those words.
すまない。考えが足りなかった。
His sudden apology caused her usual sullen expression to return. Aoko had not appreciated how angry she was, let alone the reason for it. And to her, his apology had come out of nowhere.
あんたって本当わかんないわね。なんでそこで謝るの？
She stared at Soujuro, unblinking.
あれ、そうだな。自分でもよくわからない。多分そういう気分になったからだな。
Even in saying he was not sure, Soujuro had answered honestly, and Aoko was at a loss for
た
words.
だ青崎の言いたいことは分かった。約束を守るっていうことは結果じゃなく家庭を守るってことなんだな。
Kind of a mechanical way to look at it, but I suppose that works. He shot her a brazenly honest smile. That smiling face, filled with blissful ignorance, almost made her smile back instinctively. There is a human in there.
当たり前じゃない。落ちなきゃ合ってればいいなんて恥ずかしくてできないでしょ。
Aoko attempted to cover for her embarrassment with a quick retort. Though unintentional, having her true feelings exposed like that made Aoko feel a little uncomfortable. Finding offense in something was second nature to Aoko. Being made to feel uncomfortable was not. Though far from being unhappy at the remark, she turned away from its speaker. To disguise her perceived shame, Aoko started up the conversation again.
あなたを見逃すって言うなら気持ちの問題じゃなくてちゃんと状況もそうなるようにするのは当たり前なの。宗十郎をここに住まわせることがあの約束を守ることになるんなら厄介なアリスだって言い伏せるわよ。脅かすだけならまだしもずっと瓶付けなんてさせられるわけないでしょ。
そっか。青崎があの子を説得しない素振りなのはもうできるだけの説得をした後だからなのか。あ、それで彼女とは冷戦中なんだ。
別にあんたのためじゃないわ。私は私のために約束を守ってるだけだし。お察しの通り私のやるべきことはもう終わってるし、あと
Huh? He replied, tilting his head.
あのね、いい？同居案を何とか認めさせることができるのは私だけだから、2日間ぶっ通しでアリスを言い伏せもした。けどそれ以上は無理。私 ここから先はノータッチだから。しばらくはアリスから守ってあげるけど、その間にあの子にあんたを認めさせることはあんたにしかできないんだからね。そう。
So essentially Alice is the parole board. Soujuro had not expected that at all. Alice Kuonji, the girl in black who kept everyone at an arm's length. If Aoko was a modern-day mage in hiding, then Alice was a bona fide witch from the Middle Ages.
青崎、君自分がどれだけ難しいことを言ってるか分かってるか？
そうね。私もこの件に関してだけは同情するわ。
Aoko stood up from the sofa. This was the end of the discussion, at least for now.
私たちがどんな人間かはおおよそ分かったでしょ。魔術に関してはこれ以上立ち入らない方があんたのためだから、説明はここまでね。で、肝心の今後の方針だけど、3ヶ月間ここで暮らす。当初の目標というより最初の試練は、なんとかアリスに同居人として認めてもらうこと。
More like objective survive. But yeah, alright. We'll go with
試練
that.
って言った。今そういう類のことを言った。
ごまかしてもいいことないでしょ、この手のことは。うまくいか
She
なき
could
ゃ
stand
粉
to be a
々なわ
little
けだし。
gentler, though. With her cold-blooded remark, Aoko started walking towards the door.
あ、そうそう。宗十郎の部屋だけど、3階に用意しといたから。2階のホールの裏側に階段があるから使って。ここは寮ってわけでもないし、時間は自由に使いなさい。ただし、西館にだけは入らないようにね。東館は私が借りてるから比較的安全だけど、それでも歩き回らない方が無難だわ。ま、基本安全なのはあんたの部屋とここだけよ。
Not even the
あなた
bathroom.
の説明ってまさかそれ
That's
だ
rough,
け？
dude.
青崎はいろいろおかしい。魔術なんかよりもっと大事な説明があると思う。
He desperately called out to her as she began to leave the drawing room. Aoko could not help but pity Soujuro.
せめてほら、案内とか。
面倒なんでパス。おのぼりさんを案内するなんて2回もやれば十分よ。起きたばっかりだし、とりあえず今日は部屋で休んだら。朝になったら学校まで案内してあげるから。もっとも私もそう暇じゃなし。
Oh dear, she's got
そば
that
につ
evil
いてあ
smile
げられるの
on.
は期末試験が終わるまでってことで。1週間以内にアリスと仲良くなるなり、弱みを握るなりしないと、まああれよね。
With barely a wave of goodbye, the student council tyrant walked out. Yeah, buddy. I feel it, man. He unconsciously clenched the hand he raised. Left all alone, he was at a complete loss. Then, as if to encourage him, "Hey, it's Robin!" With the sound of light, fluttering wings, a blue robin appeared out of nowhere. The tiny, chubby bird innocently looked Soujuro up and down. The blue robin, a bird said to bring happiness according to folklore, flapped its little wings as if to cheer him on. Then, with a flutter, it mercilessly flicked off the lights. Robin's a bit of a card. Kind of a jerk, too, honestly. Like master, like familiar, I suppose. Leaving Soujuro alone in the drawing room, Aoko returned to her bedroom. She closed the door to her room, and as soon as she sat on her bed, she was overcome by an unexpected wave of exhaustion. Soujuro had no way of knowing, but she had been preparing for war. In the event that Alice impulsively pulled out a ploy, Aoko had to be ready to react in an instant. She sighed heavily, but not from the fatigue she felt at fighting with
ちょっ
Alice.
と突っぱねすぎたか。
You're thinking that now, homegirl? She frowned a dejected frown. What weighed on Aoko's mind was not Alice.
でも甘くするのはあいつのためにならないし、基本おとなしくしてもらった方がいいわけだし。
It would be trouble if he wandered around like he owned the place, after all. The safest thing for him would be if he holed up in his room, too scared out of his wits to leave it.
青崎は味方だなんて勘違いされても困るしね。アリス同様、人手なし扱いされた方が楽だわ。
She nodded to herself, agreeing with her take on the situation. For the most part, it was a sound plan. If there were a problem, it would be this.
すまない青崎、一つ聞きたいことがあるんだが。
Ah, the problem has arrived. Not 10 minutes had passed since leaving him in the drawing room. For Soujuro to shirk off what he had said and visit her room so fast, it was like he had no sense of danger at all.
実は外に出たいんだ。
Of course he would ask to leave the house. Alco lacked the energy for a sarcastic barb.
洋館の中は歩き回らないし、用を済ませたらきちんと戻ってくる。ただ門限とかあったら聞いておこうと思って。
でもアルバイトには行くのよね。
How did you know? Soujuro exclaimed in surprise. When it was Alco who desired to display her shock at him.
まあいいわ。基本午後10時まで。その時間には必ず屋敷にいること。その後は夜勤に出かけるなり、庭でバーベキューするなり、何でも好きにしていい。
It would be really funny. Instead of just having a one-man barbecue out in the garden.
それと玄関に鍵はかかってないから。
気のせいじゃなければだけど、青崎、すごく怒ってないか？
あんた相手に気を使った自分に呆れ果ててるだけよ。外に出るのはいいけど、その前にこの錠剤飲んで。
Soujuro took the purple pill from her outstretched hands and dubiously put it in his mouth. He told himself that it must have been some kind of medicine.
それじゃあ行ってくる。いろいろありがとう、青崎。
あっそ。今度は窓から出ていかないでよね。
Soujuro laughed himself all the way to the foyer, unsure of what exactly he had found funny. Alco watched him go, both indifferent and amazed all at once.
予定が半日早まっただけか。あの薬を飲ませるの明日の朝にしてあげようと思ったのに。
She huffed, ruffling her hair in exasperation and returning to her room. Discerning what had made Soujuro tick was a waste of brain matter. In all likeliness, he was more concerned about missing 2 days of work than his own well-being after being bedridden for 2 days. With the day's work behind him, Soujuro returned to the mansion.
よし、どこを探しても2階のホールから上がれる階段はここだけだ。
It was just before midnight. This was the scene that awaited him beyond the rickety staircase. Not much surprised Soujuro, or rather, being surprised had become normal to him. This scene, however, was enough to leave him speechless. The room allotted to Soujuro, no matter how he looked at it, no matter how he ran it through his mind, was without a shadow of a doubt an attic. This treatment stirred a tinge of anxiety with him. Just as he was about to flop onto the taut sheets of his bed, wondering if he could make this work despite his share of other problems, he noticed an awkward courtesy so meager as to be useless.
寒かったら重ねて使うこと。これはサービスとする。
The message in the memo pointed to the meticulous personality of the author. The bed had been perfectly prepared. Carefully, setting aside the blanket that had been painstakingly placed on the edge of the bed for him in case he needed it, he looked up at the sky. She's not all bad. Though faint, the stars twinkled through the skylight. For a mountain boy, that meager light was more than enough for him. The stark contrast with the drawing room had caught him off guard, but now that he had collected himself, it was not so bad. This room fit his personality. Even if he was still not used to the building, he felt more at ease here than he did in any building in the city. Perhaps because it was built on a hill, surrounded by woods. The atmosphere here was a little closer to the mountains where he used to live.
でも家の中に霧が出るのはどうなんだろう。
I wouldn't worry about that fog. He crooked his neck, pondering over the spectacle he had witnessed. On the way to his room, Soujuro had encountered what looked like fog in the foyer on the second floor. The misty fog drifted into a portion of the corridor, reminding him of a swarm of mosquitoes. As he stared at it, he swore he could make out a strange landscape, and as he moved to get a better look at it, no! Again, out of nowhere, here inside of the mansion, a little blue bird darted purposefully in front of him.
鳥
The bird caught his attention, stopping him in his tracks. When he looked to check on the fog again, the strange scene had disappeared.
この家隙間でもあるのかな。明日尾崎に聞いてみるか。
He muttered to himself as he sat on the bed. Meager as it was, the starlight peeping in through the skylight calmed him.
これなら
Exhaling slowly, he laid down. For the time being, he had the essentials needed to live, and his bed was many times softer than it appeared. Thinking his worries seemed smaller than they were, he quickly drifted off to sleep. That was the story from when he opened his eyes to when he fell asleep. Just like that, the short night following the long night was over. For one thing was true, Soujuro was an optimist to a fault, but it wasn't the end of the world. Now, let us rewind 5 hours prior to this glutton for punishment going to bed. Actually, we've been going for about an hour, so I do believe we will pick this up next time. And depending on what the weekend looks like, I may play some more over the weekend. I quite enjoy going through this story with you guys. I find it really relaxing. Ooh, as I throw things on the ground. Ignore that. So we're going to rewind this and come back to it in the near future, I think. But in any case, I appreciate you being here with me and enjoying this lovely little story with me. I quite like it, and I hope you do too. And if not, then I hope you enjoy hanging out, because I enjoy hanging out with you guys. And I'm sure I will see you guys very soon, and if not, if you have other things to do, I hope you have a great time with it. And I hope the weekend for you is restful and relaxing and full of very good things. Peace, guys.